Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and today I have another deck profile for you for the Prismatic Evolutions metagame. This time, we have one of my favorite archetypes, Pidgeot Control. I think this deck is pretty underrated right now. It's definitely still almost as good as it was last format. Definitely not as good. It was definitely more like S tier probably last format. Whereas this time around, I think it's closer to B tier, especially going to major events. I think best of 3 is kind of tough for the list right now. But the deck certainly is very well positioned as far as just how many favorable matchups it has, how many unfavorable matchups it has. You don't lose to a lot of decks consistently. So I think that the deck is pretty strong right now. Let's get right into it, though. Definitely very different than it was last format, so lots to talk about. Jumping into the Pokemon line, we have 2/2/2 Pidgeot. This is because we are playing Grand Tree to evolve into our Pidgeot EX. This is how we get the Pidgeot EX most games. Really, pretty rarely do we Rare Candy into it. Usually it's only if the Grand Tree is prized. But we are going for the Grand Tree mostly to get around Budew. But honestly, the Grand Tree has just felt like a really consistent way to get Pidgeot out in general. Whereas you need to find Candy and Pidgeot to go for the Candy play. You just need to Thorseal Stone for Grand Tree and have a Pidgeot on bench in order to get the Pidgeot out with Grand Tree. So it actually felt possibly more consistent at getting the Pidgeot out than the previous lists. So yeah, I really like that. Definitely sucks that takes up our ace spec spot, but I do think that is the best ace spec. Just feels super consistent, especially if you're playing against decks with Budew. 2 copies of Rotom. Never want to prize this. Typically, almost always want to have this on turn 1. So playing the 2 copies, we spend a lot of turns on setup, getting our stage 2s out. I mean, Rotom with the Arven Stone package is pretty iconic in stage 2 archetypes at this point, especially with Pidgeot. 1 Serendipity. Just a lot of time we want to draw a few extra cards to get our combos off, to make sure that we hit our Wellspring, our Counter Catcher, and our Milotic, whatever we might need to chain together Bloodmoon attacks in the late game. Make sure we find. Usually we need multiple pieces, so Pidgeot can't get us all of them, and we want to go for a flip the script plus a quick search to find us everything that we need. 1 Lumineon, just a good way to find our key supporters at the right time, especially on turn 1 if we need to find something like an Arven. Luxray V here for the Fang Snipe attack. Still a great option to be able to have to get rid of opponents' Turos or Rare Candies or other resources in their hand, especially because we don't find as much time to use things like Eri. I think that the card is definitely losing value over time as sort of pitch control develops and as the metagame develops, but Pidgeot Control in its current iteration at least is going to rotate soon anyways. Luxray V is going to rotate soon anyways, and as far as right now is concerned, I do still think Luxray is worth it. So Luxray and Pitch Control will probably always be associated together here. It's just a really nice option to have, especially if you see the opponent's hand off of something like an Eri, then it's really nice to be able to, maybe you see the Turo, you can just Fang Snipe it away, or even get rid of your opponent's last copy of Boss's Orders. Wellspring Mask Ogre Bonnie X, this is our win condition in a lot of matchups. That Sob, retreat locking our opponents. Just nice and tanky, so you can survive some hits if your opponent does break lock, or against something that can do a little bit of damage but not a lot, where Mawile wouldn't be as effective. Wellspring, definitely the best retreat locker in the game. 1/1 Milotic line to prevent our opponents from playing Turo or Penny. So this can have some use in the Snorlax matchup as well, I suppose. Really any deck with Penny, but this is mostly for those Turo heavy decks, especially this card is key in the Gardevoir matchup. Makes that matchup way easier to just trap something and use Mentally Calm to prevent Turo. Against Dragapult, they can use a Dusknoir on it, but then sort of uses up one of their Dusknoirs. So Milotic still definitely has value in that matchup as well, if you can Thorton it into play, or sometimes it's just sort of safe to bench Feebas. But yeah, Milotic being able to shut down Turo in that matchup, also very useful. Definitely not as strong, weakest against Artazon, the other, most Turo heavy deck, because they have so many Boss's Orders to keep targeting it. But, I mean, if they're not bossing that, they're not bossing other things, so definitely can have some value there as well, especially if we can use, Luxray to Fang Snipe maybe a boss or 2 out of their hand. We are playing the 1 copy of Budew. It's really nice to have the option early game to slow your opponent down if you have a bit of a weaker start, and it allows you to lock out key items from your opponent. Sometimes your opponent needs a Night Stretcher to actually win the game, or needs doesn't have any way to get out of the active without items. So Budew just opens up some interesting new win conditions for the deck, where your opponent is very reliant on certain items to actually close out the game, and Ichi-Pal can just sort of lock them out. When we're playing one Bloodmoon Ursaluna EX, still to have that Bloodmoon chaining option where Bloodmoon can tank hits against a lot of things and just keep being penny looped for big knockouts. Also just nice to have that knockout option in general if we need to take out any big threats. Gives us a win con into a lot of matchups where we otherwise don't have great win conditions. On is very key in the Lugia matchup. In particular, very key against any aggressive decks like Miraidon or Gouging Fire as well, if you're not able to pull off one of your other win conditions. So, yeah, Bloodmoon Ursaluna definitely staple in the deck. The one of Chien-Pao, mostly to get rid of Grand Tree. We, of course, can use it to get rid of stadiums in general, but this is really just so that we can go ahead and get rid of our Grand Tree as soon as we use it to get our Pidgeot out. That way our opponent doesn't get access to it for things like quick Dusknoirs or Gardevoirs or Dragapults. Then we play one copy of Mantine, just to help us get Pokemon from our opponent's discard pile onto the bench. Feels pretty effective in this metagame. People aren't really playing around it for one, and even if they are, it's pretty difficult to do. This is really good against Gardevoir and Dragapult especially, which can definitely try to set up their board with no lock targets. Also good against our Chaladon, which is also often tries to discard its lock targets. Your opponent also can't really play around this and Erica's Invitation at the same time. We don't run Erica's Invitation in this list, but your opponent doesn't know that in a closed deckless format. So Mantine definitely pulls a lot of weight. Definitely feels better than like Flute or Erica in my opinion. One copy of Radiant Alakazam. This is mostly for Sob. We can have like put a Mist Energy on our Wellspring, and just sort of move that 20 damage off onto our opponent's bench Pokemon, and that way we keep something trapped in the active while taking knockouts on the bench. We can also do this with Ichi-Pollen. If we get hit by Ichi-Pollen, if we're using Ichi-Pollen to trap something, we can do the same thing, and Painful Spoons that damage off onto the bench while we use it. I actually really like this as a win condition right now. It definitely speeds games up to some degree, and because you're forever trapping something, sometimes it's better to like pick off some things on your opponent's bench with Sob than to go for the forever trap and try to deck your opponent out. Now, the matchup where this Alakazam is actually like very needed though, in particular, is the Dragapult matchup. And we'll talk about that when we get to Black Kyurem here, which Black Kyurem, very, very key in the Dragapult matchup. So we're using, basically what you want to do is use Ice Age to paralyze their Dragapult over and over again, and then you use Painful Spoons to manipulate it on their damage, on the damage on their board, so that you knock out their Dragapult with Painful Spoons during your turn. That way, whatever they bring up, you can either Sob, Trap, or Ice Age again. And that sort of keeps it in a permalock, while taking knockouts, and it's sort of the best way to deal with Dragapult, and I found at least. And I think that is generally what most Pidgeot control players are doing in the matchup right now. Just sort of spamming Ice Age. Sob can get in there a little bit here and there, but using Ice Age to do a bunch of damage to their Dragapults, and then making sure that with Painful Spoons that you knock out the Dragapult during your turn, and giving you the chance to attack again after they promote. Supporters, we have 4 copies of Arven. Just ideal for setup. We want to find this turn 1 every single game. Find our Forest Steel Stone. Find our Nest Balls. 2 copies of Penny. Just to have a little bit of healing. We do want to be able to heal our Wellsprings and our Black Kyurem, our Fang Snipe Luxray. Pick up liabilities off the board like Rotom in the mid to late game. So yeah, definitely a couple of Penny helpful. We have Pal Pads to get them back if we need more, but as long as we don't prize both of them, we can, get by with just one and recycling it with Pal Pads if we need to. Single copy of Boss's Orders, just so that we have some Gust without using Counter Catcher, but not super integral in this format. Usually, your opponent's going to take a prize card, and then you just sort of Counter Catcher your trap target. But definitely important to have as a one of. One copy of Iono, so that we have some disruption. Obviously, also some nice early game draw, but primarily being able to combo this with like Bloodmoon in the mid to late game. If we're going for like a Bloodmoon win condition to disrupt our opponent, make it more difficult to knock out the Bloodmoon or boss around it. One copy of Colress's Tenacity. I really liked having that Tenacity as an option to search off of Lumineon and then grab our Grand Tree. especially nice if we prize our Forest Seal Stone. I like this better than a second Forest Seal Stone. Then we just go Lumen for Tenacity. We can also, and we, get to grab a Mist Energy or DT at the same time, of course. It's nice having an option to search those out as well. We also play Jet Energy in this list for Mantine, so it's nice having Chorus to get access to that in addition. I play an Artazon in here, which I probably wouldn't play if I didn't play Tenacity. But it is nice to be able to Tenacity for a basic Pokemon. And, we're obviously not cutting any copies of Arven for it. It's just another good early game card for helping us get our Grand Tree combo off and get set up. One copy of Eri, just so that we do have some access to item cards in the opponent's hand. I think that there are definitely a lot of times where, you want to play this just to make sure that your opponent doesn't have win conditions in hand, like switching cards or rare candies or night stretchers. Most item cards right now are insta-play. For in most matchups for your opponent if they're playing it right. However, sometimes they just don't draw the right items at the right time, and you can discard some items cheekily with Eri. I think it's still important to have that option. Play a single copy of Thorton just so that we can get our Pidgeot EX out in one turn. It's also really nice for getting Milotic out in one turn without having to bench a 30 HP Feebas. And of course can be used just to go for set up another attacker, like getting Black Kyurem out without needing a counter gain can be really nice. Getting just Wellspring back, just as a recovery card, getting Wellspring or Bloodmoon or Fez in a pinch can also be really, really useful. It also helps you clear other liabilities off the board, like Rotom, since you can bump those out of play for other stuff. So Thornton definitely still has a ton of value in this deck. And like one copy of Roseanne's backup. We play quite a few tools, a couple of stadiums, and quite a few special energy, so I like having that nice bit of extra recovery just to make sure that I can get those back consistently. I know I've seen all of Blitzel playing the Silene in the list instead of the Roseanne's backup. I still prefer the backup. I think I see the vision in the Silene. I've definitely had a couple of situations where I'd rather Silene than backup, but I've had more situations where it needed to be the backup, at least for the consistency of it. Like, I couldn't afford to just get a Double Tails in my Silene and not get the card back. One copy of Giacomo just helps in the Lugia matchup a lot. Just having that extra bit of discard on them. A lot of the time you can just sort of, go for Blood Moon loops and sort of run them out of energy because they cost them so much energy to try to one-shot a Pidgeot or one-shot a Blood Moon that, you're taking some knockouts on those Pokemon that they're attacking with and then slowing them down with Giacomo. They can't really play a slow board either and just sort of get extra attachments and play in advance, which makes your Iono stronger if they're not attaching energy in advance. And if they do attach energy in advance, of course, you can just go for Giacomo. So one copy of Irida. I really like Irida on the deck. Of course, searching for items is great. You can get the Rare Candy, you can get Nest Ball, you can get Ultra Ball, you can get Counter Catcher. That's why 4 copies of Arven is a no-brainer in this deck, because not only is it good in the early game, but it's also good in the mid to late game. You just have so many items that you want to search out with this deck. And Irida is similarly good, and we do play actually like a really high number of water-type Pokemon now. So let's go back, actually. When we've done the support, I'll take another look at the Pokemon count and just show just how many water-type Pokemon we play here. But yeah, Irida, very, very strong. I really like being able to search out all of those water types and an item at the same time. Feels like a great consistency card and a great option off of Lumen. The last supporter is Misfortune Sisters. Allows us to, of course, just dig for those items that would normally be insta-plays for our opponent, like switching cards, rare candies, and night stretchers, or even Ultra Balls can be relevant as well. So I do prefer Misfortune Sisters over Eri, but I think that the deck has room for both right now. And I really like the Misfortune Sisters. I think that digging for some of those key resources like candies, Pal Pads, and Night Stretchers is super, super important for most of your matchups right now, honestly. But let's take a look. Yeah, the Pokemon line here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Pokemon that can be searched out with Irida now. It's a really good way to search the Milotic. But yeah, just having seven targets for Irida, to me, makes it like just a super, super good card in the deck. Okay, now we go on to the items. 3 copies of Ultra Ball, 3 copies of Nest Ball. Just the sort of the ideal what we can fit in the list for that early game consistency, making sure we get our setup. I think if I wasn't playing the Artazon, or in Tenacity, I'd probably play a 4th copy of Nest Ball, but I do like having the Artazon as well, especially with the Tenacity, just to make my Tenacity plays a little bit stronger, and it has some, a Pokemon search option if you're under item lock. 2 copies of Counter Catcher, very important to Counter Catcher in this deck. We typically only need to do it once or twice, whether we're going for like Bloodmoon attacks or Wellspring Saw Block or Kyurem. But having to, honestly, like if you could fit a third, it'd probably be nice, but 2 is usually enough in combination with like boss's orders, right? 2 Rise of Pal Pad. Just want to make sure that we pretty much always want at least 1 Pal Pad to make sure that we can get our squares back. 2 we don't always need, but it's really nice when we do have 2 in deck. We can afford to prize 1, but we'd really rather make sure that we have access to at least 1 every single game. 1 copy of Night Stretcher, just to have that little bit of extra recovery. Of course, we have Thorton, but having the recovery on an item is much more consistent when we need to get an attacker back quickly. 1 copy of Rare Candy. This is mostly here in case we prize Grand Tree, so that we can easily get the Pidgeot EX out without having to evolve it into Pidgeotto first. 1 copy of Switch, mostly just reset our Bloodmoon EX, but can be used to just get an attack off a little bit quicker, or get something out of the active after your opponent bosses it up. I play the Switch over the Switch card just in case our opponent tries to boss stall something like Milotic. We have a way to get that out of the active as well. I don't think that the heal 30 is enough for me to want to play the Switch card over the Switch personally. I also like being able to switch Pidgeot out of the active against Snorlax in certain situations, if the Pidgeot comes into play. 1 copy of Pidgeot and Heavy Ball. We play a lot of one-of Pokemon, and a lot of them are very key to certain matchups, so of course we have to play a Heavy Ball to make sure that we can fish those out. Next, we have Stadiums, Tools, and Energy. 1 copy of Artazon, like I've talked about. Sort of already given my explanations on why that's good in here. Same with the Grand Tree. You know, that's our way to get the Pidgeot out. The Forest Seal Stone, you know, that's a staple. Like I said, I like having the Tenacity as a way to search for Grand Tree better than having a second Stone to make sure I don't prize it. You're only going to prize it about 1 in 13 games anyways. And Tenacity is going to be more versatile in the games where you don't prize Forest Seal Stone. Then we have 1 copy of Bravery Charm, give some of our Pokemon a little bit of extra HP, really good for math fixing on Pokemon with, you know, that 210, 220 HP range that get one-shotted by a lot of things, but wouldn't with, you know, 50 more HP. 1 copy of Counter Gain allows us to attack with Kyurem, and with only 1 attachment allows us to attack with Bloodmoon quicker or for less energy, and allows us to attack with Wellspring for free, so it kind of can just be, you know, an Arven searchable energy attachment in a way in a lot of situations for your single energy cost attacks. So yeah, Counter Gain, very strong in the deck. You know, it's a staple, no-brainer. I don't think you need 2. I think the Roseanne's backup. I think if I didn't play Roseanne's backup, I would want 2 in there, but 1 has felt like enough. 1 copy of Defiance Vest. This is best. This is, like, obviously going to have other situations, but the primary thing for this is being able to put this on a Wellspring when you're trapping a Munkidori against Gardevoir. Since you can't be super picky about, like, most of Gardevoir's trap targets can attack in some way, you want to be able to, you know, reduce some of that damage done using Defiance Vest. And that can be true in a lot of matchups, right? There's going to be a lot of Pokemon that will trap, even like Squawkbill and stuff like that, where it's easier to just Defiance Vest and not take any damage, or take, you know, maybe only 20 damage from something like a Munkidori. Than, you know, having to penny so many more times in the game, which can make the game a lot closer, and sometimes you don't even have enough penny to keep up with that. So I really like the 1 Defiance Vest to stop that. Also, I mean, you can use it to, like, prevent Itchy Pollen as well if you want to trap a Budew in the active spot. So yeah, Defiance Vest definitely worth it in the list right now. Definitely, in my opinion, probably necessary to shore up some of those matchups. 2 copies of Double Turbo Energy. Just never want to prize both of them, and usually want to have access to both. Really good for attacking with Bloodmoon, really good for attacking with Kyurem. You can reduce your sob damage to 0 if you just want to deck out your opponent. You can attack with Pidgeot with a Double Turbo Energy, which actually comes up a fair amount, and you can Fang Snip with Double Turbo Energy. So, great card in the deck. Have to play 2, because you cannot afford to prize them both. Then we have 2 copies of Mist Energy. Very important for preventing the confusion against Munkidori. Nice for preventing Phantom Dive damage. Nice for preventing Frenzied Gouging, but primarily it's going to be that Phantom Dive damage and the Mind Bend in Munkidori when you're trapping them on the active. They're going to be worried about. You definitely need to have Mist Energy if you're going to try to trap a Munkidori with Wellspring. Then we play a single copy of Jet Energy. Gives us a little bit of flexibility, especially with Tenacity. We can search it out. Just allows us to get our single energy attackers up really easily, and primarily, you know, really good with that, with either Wellspring or Mantine, which Mantine is the key one where, you know, you want to be able to get it up into the active spot really quickly. But Jet Energy is honestly just pretty nice in general. It's really good with Bloodmoon as well. It's another way to reset your Bloodmoon other than the Switch. And it's nice to have another single energy that you can use for Bloodmoon to not have the damage reduction when you are able to deck with Bloodmoon for just 1 energy. But yeah, Jet Energy honestly in general is just like very, very strong in the deck for that extra little bit of mobility, getting your attackers in the active spot a lot easier when you have something in the active that cannot retreat for free. Favorable matchups. Starting with Dragapult Dusknoir. So I sort of explained the line earlier. We're trying to go for that Black Kyurem Alakazam line that I mentioned near the beginning of the video, and then of course we do also have Sob as a win condition. They usually only play 1 turn or 1 switch, so eventually this sort of trap with Black Kyurem, Alakazam, Sob, sort of going between these 3 is almost always going to be a winning line. The only thing you really have to worry is about Dusknoir, which you can sort of attack their Dusknoir resources with Eri and Misfortune Sisters. But Dusknoir is not going to be enough for them to take all of their prize cards, so we really only have to worry about is if you have like a particularly slow start against them. Miraidon. Miraidon, another matchup that you can trap pretty easily with Wellspring. Definitely a little bit scarier because they do have the 1 switch card to break it at one point, and they can get really aggressive with you early game and just take attacks really quickly. If they get too many prize cards ahead, the trap line no longer works unless you can Eri or Misfortune Sisters their switch card. So yeah, this match is going to be a little bit tough, but in a pinch, if the trap strategy is not working out, you can still win this matchup fairly easily with the Bloodmoon line of just swinging with Bloodmoon, knocking out their Pheasantipity over and over again, forcing them to find ways around it. If you Bravery Charm something on the bench that has like a Pheasantipity or something like that, and they can't even like Iron Bundle for prize cards, they have to like boss on your Pidgeot. So yeah, there's just multiple win conditions in this matchup. Bloodmoon Loop is a very decent win condition to them, and the Wellspring Trap should usually be a good win condition to them as well. So, of course, you can, if you're having trouble in the early game, you can always slow them down with Budew. Next, we have Gardevoir. So again, I sort of talked about this matchup as well. This is one where probably Mantine is the most important because I find that they can pretty well play around like Erica's Invitation and just not bench anything if they open like a Ralts. And Spiritomb, of course, can get you into slower and sticky starts and stickier situations here. But usually, especially with the Mantine, it's going to be pretty easy to eventually get something in the active that that is a trap target for you. And then you just sort of go Sob with Mist Energy Defiance Band. And ideally a double Turbo Energy as well. And that way they aren't able to bounce the damage back at you with the Munkidori. Or sorry, not Defiance Vest, not Defiance Band. But yeah, whatever it may be, you should usually be able to Saw Block something in the active spot. It can be a little bit annoying if they have a full board of, Ralts, Spiritomb, and then something else that you can't trap. But generally, it's not going to be a major issue. I mean, like, Klefki and Fluttermane are still decent trap targets. And basically, if you play the Snorlax matchup as Gardevoir, or the Gardevoir matchup as Snorlax, then you sort of understand how to, like, go about it if they have a board full of attackers where, you sort of force energy. You Sob the Gardevoir EX, they put 3 energy on it, they hit you, and then you counter catch something else, you Sob that, they put energy on that, they hit you, you bring up something else, you Sob that, and eventually they're all of the energy committed to the board, and they run out of ways to power up new things that you're bringing up into the active spot. Especially because they can't use Turo, as long as you have your Milotic set up, so. Regidrago V-Star. Another pretty favorable matchup of this deck, especially with Black Kyurem and Sob. You have 2 win conditions. You have Budew to slow them down in the early game. A lot of lists are playing less ways to get out of the active as well right now because they're trying to figure out ways to deal with Budew. But yeah, Black Kyurem and Sob should pretty much always be able to get lock down Drago for long enough for you to win the game, especially if you can get rid of some of their resources with Eri and Misfortune Sisters. And if they use too many resources trying to get Drago out of the active spot, break Paralysis, or break a Retreat Lock, then you can go for Bloodmoon Iono combos in the late game, and a lot of time sweep them that way with them down so many resources from the natural course of trying to break Lock and Eri and Misfortune Sisters. Charizard, a matchup that's very easy to trap something, so that's going to be your primary condition, just like the Pult Dusknoir matchup, but way, way easier. So it's never been very good against Pidgeot control, and it's not going to start now. In fact, if anything, the Charizard lists that I've seen around lately are not prepared to play against control decks whatsoever. I think that, you should have a very easy time with Sob Block into Charizard. Next, we have Cloth. This is a deck that doesn't usually play Petra on DX anymore. I do in my list, but I have not seen most lists running it any longer. It's pretty tough for them to one-shot a Pidgeot, so you should be able to usually just saw block something and have a pretty decent time. I think that, running them out of resource and sort of blood mooning later is also going to be a pretty realistic win condition for them, because it's pretty hard for them to draw double turbo energy off of Iono at times. That's a lot of time how they can lose. But the matchup's definitely pretty close. They can definitely, get some donks against you, or, their Budew works too well against you early game and you just sort of you struggle to set up. So there are some issues there, but I think that generally speaking, the matchup is definitely favorable for Pidge. Snorlax, another good matchup. They can't use Penny, so you can sort of just use Milotic to lock them out of that. And then honestly, you can just sort of attack them. This list doesn't have a way to go infinite against Lax like Lecky and Zero Sig. But using Eri and Misfortune Sisters and Fang Snipe to run them out of resources and then just sort of attacking them is honestly often going to be a pretty good win condition anyways. Fang Snipe in particular is really, really strong into the matchup. If you just start spamming Fang Snipe, you can discard like basically all the cards from their deck eventually. And then you just Iono them. Definitely not as good of a game plan without Zero Sick, but it still works a lot of the time. But anyways, we have Raging Bolt, another deck that you can retreat lock very, very easily. Retreat lock, like I said, is kind of just your main win condition in this format. It works really well against other stuff, but this again is a deck where if the retreat lock isn't working, if they have too many switch cards left, you can just go for a Blood Moon loop, and that is going to be a very good plan B. Dragon Bolt Charizard, similarly to Dragon Bolt and Charizard, you should be able to retreat lock through this matchup once again. They also don't have Dust Noir, so they have even less ways of dealing with you. They can't not pop your Milotic, so as long as you get something in the active spot that you can lock, it's going to be pretty easy, and they don't play enough Psychic Energy to usually power up enough of a combination of Psychic and Vine Energy to power up all of their attackers on board, even if they manage to fill their board with Pokemon that cannot normally be trapped. They will eventually run out of energy, sort of similarly to how we were talking about in the Gardevoir matchup. Ancient Box is another pretty strong matchup. I think that just generally, you can go for some Fang Snipes early when they can't one-shot your Luxray V yet and discard quite a few of the resources. And then Eri and Misfortune Sisters, they're just runs them out of resources so quickly. They can't afford to go down too many stretchers or their Pal Pad or lose too many supporters or lose their boss and their Pal Pad. And then you can sort of just Blood Moon sweep them later in the game. So yeah, I find that to be a pretty effective strategy against Ancient Box when I play it. Iono Blood Moon late game and, discarding a lot of their resources in the early game. Even matchups, we have Lugia, a deck that can still just run you over by getting your Pidgeot knocked out really, really quickly. But with Giacomo and Blood Moon counter-catchering their Archeops, usually you can, sort of put them into a position where they don't have enough Archeops to set up just keep setting up attackers. And then you sort of just knock out what energy they have on board. Your Blood Moon with a Bravery Charm is really hard to knock out, so you just keep Penny looping it, and then Giacomo is going to come in there to get rid of some extra energy over the course of the game once you've knocked out those Archeopses and they have to start attaching manually. Archaludon, still pretty tough, even with the Milotic, since they can just boss KO it so many times, but if you can, Fang Snipe, successfully get rid of a boss or two here or there, Blood Moon Loop is going to be a very real win condition late game as well. If you Milotic them out of the Churros, then you can just sort of play that, you just keep Blood Moon looping. A lot of the lists are not playing Dialga anymore, so they don't actually have a way to one-shot Blood Moon or Pidgeot. It's really, really nice for you. Except for the Relicanth, which you do have to worry about. The nice thing about the Relicanth here is that if they play the Relicanth to get around the Blood Moon, then that's a trap target, and if they, and if you have Milotic in play, then you can just sort of trap the Relicanth, and they cannot boss the Milotic and then retreat the Relicanth, right? So they can't do both on the same turn, and you can just sort of, if they bend something like that, you can usually just lock them out of Turo in the game. Of course, Mantime is also going to be a way to get some Pokemon like that into the game that you can easily trap. Unfavored, we have Ceruledge. Ceruledge has those jet energies, so they can get around the Milotic blocking Turo. That doesn't really do anything to them. They might have quite a few trap targets, but they have enough Jet Energies to take a bunch of prizes against us. And they can set up an early board without trap targets, obviously. They also have potential Moonlight Shuriken turn 2 to knock out our Pidgeys. They have Budew to potentially slow us down, and they can one-shot after the first few turns anything that we put up usually. So this matchup, super, super tough. We don't really have a lot of good tools of actually beating them. Retreat Lock is probably going to be your best line, maybe, but even then, like, if they play 3 Jet Energy, they're going to be able to knock out your Wellspring 3 times. So honestly, Blood Moon looping might be a consideration, but I mean, Blood Moon's not even going to one-shot them. So similarly, Judging Fire, no deck we struggle with because with Brave Charm, they can get around the one-shots with Blood Moon. With Adrenabrains, they can be one-shotting our Pidgeot, and they play the full 4 copies of Jet Energy and a Switch cart, so lots of mobility. We can't really trap anything, and they can just sort of one-shot things turn after turn. We don't have... They can also Delphox via our Pidgeys. We don't have really good answers to Judging Fire or Ceruledge, these, like, heavy Jet Energy decks that are, like, full of basic energy, so we can't prey on them by narking Archeops and playing Giacomo like we can against Lugia. These matchups are super, super tough. They're definitely what you want to dodge is pitch control, but also not incredibly popular. I think, you take favorable matchups into most of the decks in the format, and then even matchups against 2 pretty solid decks, and then unfavorable matchups against 2 less popular decks. I think that is, this is a really good looking matchup chart for any deck. Most decks dream of a matchup chart like this. So, but that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to check out my socials or any of my other content, you can find all of that through the link tree below. Have a great day.